Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council, navigating the human experience together.
Yiftheg, Tero, and welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry. It's Christmas, and for a lot of people that means a time to go home. And our chat today is about a different kind of homecoming. Here to share the story with us are the Executive Director of the Northern Mariana Islands Museum of History and Culture, Leonard Leon, and also historian of the CNMI Historic Preservation Office, Martha Yiftheg. Lenny, Martha, welcome. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Catherine.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. So, homecoming. It all started with an email you got just a few months ago, Lenny.
Yeah. So the rematriation of the ancestral remains from the Mariana Islands that were shipped to the University of California at Riverside by the University of Hawaii at Manoa's Department of Anthropology back in 1979.
What did this email say, and was it anything like you expected?
So earlier this year, I did hear that there were some ancestral remains from the Marianas that were being stored in California. Where exactly, I wasn't so sure. This was only through passing that somebody had told me at FESPAC.
Festival of Pacific Arts?
Yeah, the FESPAC, Festival of Pacific Arts 2025, right? That was held in Hawaii. I briefly heard about it. I was not on board yet at the NY Museum. So I couldn't really entertain it. I couldn't, because I wasn't sure if I was getting the job or not at the time. So I didn't want to pretend to play the role, right? And mislead people thinking that I'm going to be, and then anyway, I did kind of just, heard about it through passing, but it wasn't until September when a group of Pacific Islanders held a Zoom meeting for the attendance at the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums. That somebody had mentioned that they were going to send me an email. This is Fan Lujan, who was the director and curator for the Pacific Island Ethnic Arts Museum in California. She's of Chamorro descent from Guam, lived in both Guam and CNMI, and now resides in California, who had just alerted me that she was going to send me an email. In less than 24 hours, I received an email that said, hey, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are some ancestral remains from the Mariana Islands that are being stored at UCR, which is University of California, Riverside. So I immediately responded, tell me about it. What's going on? How can I help? And somehow it just aligned. As I said earlier, I received a scholarship from ATOM, the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums, to travel to California, Palm Springs, to attend the ATOM 2025 conference for museums and libraries, right? And Riverside is just 1 hour away from Palm Springs.
How convenient.
Very convenient. Very, very convenient. And so, I continued communication with Auntie Fran. It's like, how do I get a hold of Riverside? So she started doing the e-introductions. I got to meet Megan Murphy, who was the NAGPRA, UCR NAGPRA coordinator.
Now, what is NAGPRA? We're going to get into it, but
We're
it
gonna get
stands
into
for...
Native American Grave Protection Act, right,
right.
of 1990. So I got to meet Megan Murphy, who was the coordinator, the UCR NAGPRA coordinator, and she started shooting me all these emails and all these documents about, okay, this is what we have, this is where we got them, this is how we got them, this is when we got them, and where they're from. As soon as I got confirmation, it's like, okay, what are the chances of me bringing these over? And I shot them a snippet of the CNMI Public Law 10-05, which enables the NMI Museum to pursue rematriation or repatriation of ancestral remains and artifacts back to the CNMI. Right? Then I reached out to HPO and it's like, hey, we have some ancestral remains. Or we did some discussions, and it was, agreed that the best interest was to return those ancestral remains. That's when I reached out to the president and CEO of ATOM, asking if they can extend my stay in California so that I can conduct a rematriation, which they, happily did. Like within the next day, I was like, oh, here's a new schedule. We're going to continue your hotel. We're going to give you extra stipend to stay back 2 more days to take care of all of this stuff.
Nice.
Right?
That's great support.
Yeah.
So, Martha, what do we know about, I'll call them these people?
Well, we know that these people came from the Marianas, specifically one from Tinian in the Taiga area, one from the Grotto, and 2 from the Pakpak area, like around San Antonio area. We know that they were here, and then they were sent off to Hawaii for further research, and then from there they were sent to UCR to do some radiocarbon analysis, and then it just maybe, kind of got lost while it was there. What we do know is that they were from prior to the Spanish area.
And this happened during, my question to you before we started the show was like, why did we send them to like Hawaii, and like, how did they end up in California? And so this actually happened during the Trust Territory when Saipan was the capital of the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands.
Yep, so a lot of research all around Micronesia, anything that needed to be tested came to Saipan, and then, made its way to Hawaii, and, from there, these set of our, human remains got lost while in California.
So we don't yet know a whole lot about them. That wasn't part of the study, but we do know that they came from here, what villages they came from, and that they needed to get back. Why did you feel it was important for you to undertake this? You're fresh in the office, the museum has a lot of things that need to get done, a lot of projects, a lot of responsibilities, but it seemed like this was something you felt was very important. Why is that?
I honestly, I really don't know, aside from my cultural belief as a Marshallese, is the living and the dead are no different. The only thing is one is able to walk and the other one is not. So you have to treat them the same, right? You treat your deceased relatives the way you would treat your living relatives, with the most respect and as elders, right? So that kind of gave me the nudge, but it really, I don't know. I just felt like it just needed to be done. Something spoke to me that it just needs to be done, and that was it. I didn't question it. I just did everything I could, or we did everything we could to get it done.
Well, we want to hear the second part of the story, which was you actually getting to the remains and getting them back after the break.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be back after this.
Looking for resources about Mariana's history, culture, and more? Well, check out the Northern Marianas Humanities Council's collection. Our extensive video, audio, and photographic library can be found on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at 670 Humanities. Or check out the written resources on our website at nmhcouncil.org. And for those who prefer a good book, we also have a selection of local publications for purchase. So, dive in, explore, and share your comments as we navigate the human experience together.
Welcome back. So Lenny, you're in California, University of California, Riverside, and we finally put you in touch with the remains. It's actually a very touching, it was more than just putting them in a box and bringing them over. How did that go?
We did it as respectfully as we possibly could, with cultural ethics and as our guide to how we were going to do this. The representatives from the Jotankizu Public Library, along with myself and the NMC Archives, Mr. Raymond Munya, went to UCR like 4 or 5 days prior to our actual handover of the ancestral remains, right? Our intention was to go there ahead of time and kind of feel it out, and let the ancestral remains or their spirits know of our intentions, right? Before we could really make a decision. So a decision was not really made until our initial visit, which was on a Tuesday, and then we turned back on Saturday of the same week.
Can I just ask, how were they actually stored, and where were they?
So they were being stored at a basement of a library. So UCR does not really have a museum or anthropology department. I don't believe they had one. So what had happened is they stored those in a library, and they were kept in a archival box in a very, very cold room. Climate control, obviously, and there were cloth and other stuff that were evident of other Chamorro communities in California making their visits to them.
Oh, like they had left something? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I guess a year prior to my arrival to UCR, there were already Chamorro communities in California that were aware of the ancestral remains, and so they had made visits prior to our arrival, and they had made their offers of flowers, shells, and other trinkets, including taking the ancestral remains and taking them out of their foils and wrapping them in cloths. So they did really good to, at least
Give respect.
Yeah, give respect and properly wrap the. And they were also very fortunate. We were also very fortunate that the UCR NACPRA program are very understanding and very cooperative in consultation, to try and conduct all these processes. It's a Western process, but we try to conduct it as much as possible to closest to Pacific Island cultural practices, particularly Micronesian cultural practices.
So the Chamorros in California, I understand, actually had a send-off when you guys were returning.
It was Chamorro and Carolinians, actually. There was a family from Tonopec, there was a family from San Roque. There was, I believe, their Santos family from Tonopec, and then Castro Kisa families from San Roque that also made it out to join us. There were Chamorros that are originally from Guam that now reside in California that drove 3 hours to attend the send-off. Yeah, we had about, I would say, about 50 people that came together, and this was all thanks to Auntie Fran Lujan, as well as Heidi Cuenga. Heidi Cuenga is the Katuran Chamorro Fafanagui, as the Chamorros call him, which is the teacher, right, for the Katuran Chamorro dance group or chant group over in diaspora in California.
So Martha, HPO had a small but important part to play in making sure that Lenny didn't run into any trouble transporting these bones across airports and customs. And what was it you guys did to help facilitate this?
So as soon as Lenny told us about these our ancient remains in California, we were totally on board and, you know, wanted to help in any way we can. And so it was discussed that we would write a letter of support for Lenny to bring back, you know, for the museum, and so that as he went along, he wouldn't have difficulty, you know, through TSA or through check-in or anything like that, that he had the support of the Historic Preservation Office and the State Historic Preservation Officer.
I'm sure.
If I may add,
Yes, please.
the Office of, or the Historic Preservation Office really did conduct thorough reviews of local and federal laws, particularly Section 106 as well as NICPRA, to make sure that we were in compliance, and we did all the rematriation in a very ethical and lawful way. Yeah.
What is this word rematriation? I've heard of repatriation. What is rematriation?
So, you know, repatriation, it kind of gives the process. But rematriation, it kind of indigenizes that, and it allows us to have ceremony, you know, meeting our ancestors, you know, paying our respect, having ceremony. And this was done at UCR, you know, giving us the space to pay our respects. That's rematriation.
Interesting. So we also had part of that rematriation occurred when the remains arrived in Saipan. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Indigenous Affairs Office and the Carolinian Affairs Office really did an awesome job in organizing these, the return. We did want to let the community know that, you know, there were going to be ancestral remains returning, because we felt that it was important to have the community be a part of it. And that's what makes it different, right, from repatriation. Is a repatriation would be a museum institute with another museum institute, and that's it. Sign papers, transfer, send, as opposed to a rematriation where we had the cultural communities wait at the airport, or cultural communities in diaspora send off the ancestral remains, and then a cultural community receiving the ancestral remains upon arrival. And we also had Uncle Donald Mandela, who was a Ceruano and a Zo'anti here in the Marianas, do a little prayer, right? Or give a little chant. There are two culture groups. I I apologize to the culture groups, the dancers from the CNMI. One is led by April Repecki, and the other group led by Leanne Borja. They came together as one group for that arrival or receiving, and they did some chants and dances as well. But this was all orchestrated and organized by the Indigenous Affairs Office. I think it's important to acknowledge that the Indigenous Affairs Office is to go to, at least for the NMI Museum, to reach out to all these communities, cultural practitioners, and I hope the community would do that. Reach out to them and use their resources, take advantage of their resources, because they have very, very useful and supportive resources. Right. So it's the Carolinian Affairs Office. So that was really emotional. And one thing I did notice is at the arrival at the airport, the CNMI Saipan Airport, there were people in tears, right? And it was the same image in California at UCR. There were people in tears, and this, at least to me, was a sign that what we did was right, or that what we did is something that needed to be done, and something that had to be done for so long, and I guess it's about time.
Well, I said we were going to talk about the Native American Graves Protection Repatriation Act. Well, we're not. We're going to save that for another show when appropriate. We're going to have Lenny back, right? We're going to have Lenny back to explain that. But first of all, congratulations really on bringing everybody together, so many parties together to make this happen. It sounds like the doors just opened up once you made a decision that this is the direction you wanted to take. I want to give you time for any final thoughts before we go today on this beautiful story.
Let's see. I mean, this was so great to be part of. Thank you, Lenny, for reaching out to us, to HPO and to the SHPO, and letting us be a part of this. We look forward to any more that come across our tables. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there will be more stories along these lines.
There are more. We're working on other stuff. Yeah. No, I like you were alluding to earlier, saying for some reason everything just fell to place. Everybody came together, and I think it's really important to acknowledge, the voluntary efforts by the University of California, Riverside to rematriate the ancestral remains, but also to the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums for their financial support and willingness to really throw in additional funds to make sure we stay back and finish all the paperwork that we needed to do to finalize rematriation efforts. Jutin Public Library really assisted as well. They stayed back to give me moral and spiritual support to be able to carry these ancestral remains back home. Otherwise, it would have been me on the plane holding a pelican case on my lap. Indigenous Affairs Office, Carolinian Affairs Office, NIHI, Indigenous Media in Guam, also threw in some money to try and capture some of these rematriation or the handovers in California. Humanities Council, MVA really gave us a good collection of items to bring to offer. We cannot be Pacific Islanders and not have anything to offer to as a gift, to the people we're visiting. Mm-hmm. Tinian Mayor's office, Saipan Mayor's office, Carolinian Affairs office really made tours for me to offer as well. So it was really, really great. And then Uncle Donald, who was our cultural advisor throughout the entire phase. I think that was one of the key points to making it more of a rematriation than repatriation was the cultural voice of it, and Uncle Donald did provide that cultural significance.
Well, thank you both for your work and for making this possible, really, on behalf of not only your offices, but really the people of the Marianas, who obviously are very touched by what you guys have done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Our guests today have been Lenny Leon. He's the Executive Director at the Northern Mariana Islands Museum of History and Culture, and Martha Yiftheg. She's a historian at the CNMI Historic Preservation Office, and they've shared with us today the story of the recent rematriation of human remains that were taken from the Marianas in the 1900s and now returned this year. This has been Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Your Humanities Half Hour has been made possible in part by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Democracy demands wisdom. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. For more information or to share your thoughts, contact the Northern Marianas Humanities Council at nmhcouncil.org or on social media at 670 Humanities. That's 670 Humanities.